All right, so now that we have our grid constructed, we're ready to open up Dynamo. Dynamo is available under the Manage tab over here on the right. I'm going to click on Dynamo. Take a second to open. Yours won't open this way. It'll probably open in a bigger screen. Pay attention to this screen. There's a lot of good things on it. The Dynamo website, some tutorials, and some really good sample files to learn how to do basic techniques within this visual programming environment. On the left-hand side, we have the idea of opening a new document, which is what we're going to do. But you can also open up existing ones, and it keeps a list of files that you've had open. So it's very similar to a Revit open file. So I'm going to click New. And I'm going into the same environment, which is why I'm making these videos, this troublesome environment of not seeing a 3D view. But I did want to take a second to show you what it should look like. So I'm going to go to Available Previews, and I'm going to turn on the background preview. And now you see we have a 3D visualization, and we have these extra icons up here. For some reason, on many of the laptops that are probably using NVIDIA cards, it's a little bit troublesome to try and troubleshoot why we're not getting this 3D mode in Dynamo. And because we're remote, I can't figure out a way to easily address the problems on a computer by computer basis. So it would seem just simpler that since it's not a deal breaker for using Dynamo, that we could still work through it in the kind of 2D mode. So I'm going to go back to View and set this to turn the background preview off again, so we're back to that kind of 3D mode, or 2D mode, excuse me. And now we can start experimenting with the development of some objects. So I'm going to squeeze this window down so we can always take a look at what's happening inside of Revit while we're doing something in Dynamo. And these two pieces of software are really talking to each other all the time. And to kind of demonstrate that, I'm going to place a point on the drawing. So I'm going to open up the Geometry tab, and I'm going to go down to Points and to Point, and I'm just going to select a point by coordinates, 3 Cartesian coordinates, X, Y, and Z, and I'll select that, and you'll notice right away a point shows up on the screen, and the node also shows up. Now I want to show you a shortcut right away. I can right-click and start typing point, and I'll get that same functionality over here. I'll use the shortcut quite a bit, but in learning, it's many times better to go to the chart just to see what's available as far as other kinds of functionality. And this will become clear to you later as you start to move through the projects. So we have this point. It's in blue because Dynamo is reporting its image here, but it's not an actual object. You can't actually select it with inside of Dynamo. And let's start to look at what we can do as far as moving this point. So I'm going to use what's called a number. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to type in number. And there's all kinds of there's numbers that you can just put a single number in, or a number slider, which means you can use a slider to go from 0 to 100 or whatever you want to set it for. And I'm just going to use the number just to demonstrate a couple of things. I'm going to put the number 20 in. And I'm going to tie that to the X because I want you to see what happens to the blue line when I connect those. It moved down 10 boxes. We made these 2 foot apart. So it moved down 10 boxes, 20 feet, to put the coordinate in along this, what is Revit's X-axis coordinate. If I now detach it, it'll go back to the 0 point, and I'll put it back to the Y. Now what I'll do is actually, because this is a little hard to see, I'm going to just duplicate this so that we always have this single coordinate point, and then you can see how it moves with respect to it. So I've added just a second point that's not going to move. I'll get rid of it in a second, but it'll be easier for you to see how these two are changing with respect to each other around this single coordinate point. Now we're going to make a kind of a radical jump. We're going to make a sequence of numbers, and I'm going to spend less time describing it and more time showing it. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to use what's called a code block. A big jump, we're going to use this term a lot. Code block allows you to type in anything you want to type in. And I'm going to make up a sequence from 0 to 20 in increments of 2, which is the 2-foot spacing that we have. So I'm going to go 0, period, period, 20, 0 to 20, period, period, increment of 2. And then I just click off of that, and you'll notice it's now added a little bit of what's syntax, the way it needs to be written, and gives us a node or an output wire that we can now connect to something. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete the number 20 now. I'm just going to remove that. And I'm going to connect this to the X. And now we get a sequence of numbers, 10 points moving in the X direction. I'm going to do it now in the Y direction, and you'll see it go off in the other way. And now I'm going to hook it to both the X and Y, and you'll notice it moves in the diagonal. So this is just a basic idea of how we can put points in space inside of Revit that can be dictated by some kind of code that we write over here, or nodes that we assemble together. Now we're going to need a grid of points to make our ceiling tile system. So I want to show you how we get from a single line of points moving in a diagonal to this kind of an array. And that's an idea about how this looks at each one of these points. And I'm going to use what's called a watch box. To show you what comes out of this element. So we're getting a list of 10 points at increments of 2, and you can see here how the 2, it's going from 2 to 4 to 6 in the X direction. It's also incrementing up that same amount in the Y direction, and that's why we get a diagonal point. And we have 11 total points, which is 0 all the way up to 10. And so we always include 0 in our counting, even though in math 0 means nothing. In digital coordinates or in Cartesian coordinates, 0 means the 0 position. We can make this change by going from, if I click on this, if I right click on this over the auto and I go to lacing, the way it looks at that input from X and Y, and I'm going to now make it a cross product. And you'll notice that instantaneously now it's changed into an array, a 10 by 10, or excuse me, an 11 by 11 array. We now have 121 points. And what's really important to look at is what's showing up in this watch box. This is something we'll do very frequently inside of Dynamo. I can't grab the bar to stretch it out here for some reason. But what we have now are lists of lists. So we have a list, one list of 10 points, then another list, then another list, then another list, all the way through up to 11 lists, with each one containing 11 points. And that's why we get this 11 times 11, or 121 points. So I'll end the clip now because we've learned how to put a point in space, which can represent eventually our ceiling tile, and make those points as an array in 2 dimensions so we can do a full grid layout.